This is the way that God made us. We shouldn't be surprised by this. We shouldn't be surprised by this. So, marriage requires an investment. Both people being equally and totally invested in one another, seeking to meet the needs of their spouse. Seeking to meet the needs of their spouse. So let's talk about the needs of the spouses. And first, let's talk about the needs of the husband. How does a wife respect her husband? How does a wife respect her husband? Well, first of all, maybe I should state this, that there was a study done, a survey of men, and 76%, just over 3/4 of men, when given the choice between feeling alone and unloved or inadequate or and unappreciated, chose that they would rather feel alone and unloved than inadequate and unappreciated. In other words, respect. That they would rather be alone and unloved than disrespected in their relationships. So this is not uncommon. Now, the truth is that neither of them, men would not want either of those things. But forced to choose, most men choose respect over love in relationships. So men do generally desire respect. But how are wives to respect him? Well, I should tell you that I didn't just rely on my own knowledge for this series. I've been doing a fair amount of research and relied upon Dr. Robert Travis heavily. Dr. Robert Travis is the director of the Marital Health Studies Institute at the University of Alabama and has done a lot of research on married couples. One of the things, I'm teaching a class for diaconia called Proclamation, and we talk about whenever you get up to speak publicly, you need to have authority and integrity. Okay, authority means that you are of knowledge of the subject. Okay, well, I've got some knowledge of the subject. I'm a married man. I'm a pastor who's read the Bible, so I've got some authority. But I'm seeking, even more authority, going to God, saying, God, what is your desire? Speaking with people and seeking some of the best research that's available on this subject. And integrity is the other issue, and that is, do I live what I'm talking about? And when we get to how does a husband love his wife, this is where I question my integrity. Because I, for one, like every husband, has failed to perfectly love his wife. And so right now I'm telling you that I lack integrity to speak before you today. That I am seeking integrity in my own relationship on this issue, as I think every husband will be. And that I'm inadequate as we see how it is that we are to measure up. So for authority, I'm looking to Scripture. I'm looking to some research that has been done by Dr. Robert Travis. And for integrity, I'm seeking to do my very best at being a faithful husband in loving my own life. Okay, so how do wives respect their husbands? First, give him some space. Give him some space. It seems so simple, right? But Dr. Robert Travis recognizes that the husband's most common complaint is feeling smothered in a relationship. Like the demands of family and the spouse are so high that they don't have time enough for himself. Oftentimes, I think if you look at healthy relationships, you'll find that there's a good balance in that relationship of time spent. But one of the things that's important to recognize, for wives to recognize, is that husbands men typically desire some time alone. Some time alone, downtime, however you want to call it. One of the things that you might want to do, wives, is ask your spouse, do you have enough time to yourself? Ask that question. Because perhaps you're already meeting the needs of your spouse, but perhaps not. And they're not able to communicate that with you. So communication is key, but giving him some space is one way that you can respect your husband. Second, resist the temptation of mothering him. Women typically make great mothers. I think God designed us that way, right? But one of the problems, one of the difficulties is a tendency, I think, sometimes for wives to not be able to make the switch or the transition from mothering children to communicating respectfully with their husband. And that is, albeit a difficult transition, a difficult switch to make. But the second most common complaint among men about their spouses is that of nagging. Feeling like their spouse is always nagging them, treating them like a child. Treating them like a child. Excuse me. And so it's important. We all want to be respected. We want to be treated like adults. And so if you want your husband to be more of a man, then treat him like a man, not like a child. Treat him like a man in your relationship if you want him to be like a man. Third, be your husband's biggest fan. Be your husband's biggest fan. Another concern of men is that they feel sometimes as if their wives are their biggest critic. And that can be destructive in a relationship. Because I think men sometimes have difficulties with feeling like they are built up or inadequate, right? Remember, they want to feel inadequate and appreciated. Or they want to feel adequate and appreciated, not inadequate and unappreciated. And so a wife being supportive and encouraging is a lot like living out our command to love one another, encourage one another, build each other up as we read in the Bible. You heard in the clip the woman saying, honey, a man's got to be a hero to his wife before he can be a hero to anyone else. And so it's important that's partly the wife's responsibility, to treat your man like your hero. Like your hero. Recapture that reason why you fell in love with him in the first place. And allow him to be your hero. Your hero. It will do wonders to your relationship. For him to know that you are cheering him on. Be his biggest fan. I once heard a marriage counselor talk about how oftentimes men end up being prone to extramarital affairs when they feel constantly beaten down by their spouse. And unfortunately, I think that might be true. That may be true. I don't think it's true in every case by any stretch of the imagination. But men oftentimes will look for ways in which they feel built up and supported, where they feel good about who they are. And oftentimes that can happen outside the marriage if inside of the marriage if they're beaten down all the time. So pay attention. Be your husband's biggest fan. And fourth and finally, appreciate his sacrifices. Appreciate his sacrifices. Again, men want to be appreciated. Want to be appreciated. Often they don't feel as though their wives fully appreciate the things that they do. How often is it that we view in our relationships, we view contributions to the relationship almost like we're scoring, how much I do for the family and for the relationship and how much the other person does. And in our own minds, we score things differently, right? Wives score things differently than husbands do. Moral of the story here, stop scoring. Stop scoring and just seek to appreciate what your spouse does do. Appreciate what your spouse does do. Recognize and thank your husband for what he does. A man needs to know that he's valued by his wife and appreciated. So those are some very simple, basic tools for how wives can realistically build up respect for their husbands in the relationship. Now let's talk about the needs of the wife. How does a husband love his wife? And like I said, as I was preparing this and reading this, I'm feeling very convicted for my shortcomings as a man, as a husband. Absolutely. First of all, give your wife your time. Give your wife your time. Most common complaint of wives of their husbands is lack of time and attention. Lack of time, quality time with one another. And so while the husband wants space and time away, the wife needs space or needs time with, in contact with. And so it's a recognizing a balance that's needed here. Yes, you as a husband needs time away and some time apart. But when you're not feeling the need for time away and time apart, think of your spouse's need for time with, time together, quality time, quality time. So give your wife your time. Give your wife your time.